In the vast, indifferent expanse of the cosmos, a galactic power made a mistake. A simple miscalculation, a misinterpreted word, and 234 children vanished in a silent flash of cosmic force. They thought it was a tactical strike, a demonstration of power against primitives. They were wrong.
Terribly, catastrophically wrong. Because on that small blue planet, children weren't just statistics. And the silence that followed wasn't submission. It was the sound of a sleeping giant waking, united by grief and ready to unleash a fury the galaxy had never, in 10,000 years, dared to imagine. What happens when a universe pushes humans too far? You're about to find out. Please wait. Before we start, tap that iCard button in the top right corner and smash that subscribe button right now. Hit the notification bell so you're first in line when new stories land. All right, let's dive into the story. 3 hours before the Galactic Confederation's precision strike, long before anyone understood the devastating error, a small, unassuming data packet arrived on the desk of Alara Vance, a human xenolinguist working a graveyard shift at the Terran Contact Analysis Hub. It wasn't flagged for urgency, just another automated translation from a distant, newly monitored alien network. The subject line, translated clumsily from an unfamiliar script, read, "Child Holding Facility Operational Parameters." Alara, a woman whose sharp intellect was often hidden behind a perpetually tired gaze and a collection of mismatched mugs, rubbed her temples. Another thrilling night of deciphering alien bureaucratic jargon. She clicked the file open. The text was dense, filled with references to juvenile units, caretaker protocols, and developmental environments. The aliens, it seemed, were discussing something akin to their version of childcare facilities. Alara scrolled through the document, her eyes scanning for linguistic anomalies or cultural insights. Most of it was dry, procedural language. Then, she hit a section detailing security measures. It mentioned minimal external defenses, a focus on internal safety protocols, and a prohibition on military-grade shielding. This struck Alara as odd. Most alien facilities, even civilian ones, incorporated robust defensive systems. She made a mental note to flag this section for further review, but the system was logging another incoming transmission, this one from a Confederation military channel. The new packet was brief, encrypted, and marked with the highest priority. Alara's access level was sufficient to decrypt it, but the content was outside her usual purview. It contained tactical data, target coordinates on Earth, identified as a youth military training compound, and authorization for a precision kinetic impactor. Alara's blood ran cold. A strike on Earth? This was unprecedented. She immediately cross-referenced the coordinates with known human installations. The location, a remote area in Montana, corresponded to an orphanage, the same one mentioned in the dry, bureaucratic document she just read. Panic seized her. This wasn't a military target. It was a home for children. Orphan children. The Confederation intelligence had fundamentally misinterpreted the data. A youth military training compound was a horrific mistranslation of the child-holding facility. The minimal defenses weren't a sign of technological inferiority. They were a sign of a place built for care, not conflict. The prohibition on military shielding was because you don't need blast doors and energy shields for a building full of kids. Alara's fingers flew across the keyboard, attempting to send an urgent override to the Confederation fleet. Her message was simple: target misidentified, civilian structure, orphanage, abort strike. The system processed her request, but the response was immediate and automated. Insufficient clearance for strike vector override. Message forwarded to relevant command channels. Stand by for confirmation. She didn't have time to stand by. The clock in the corner of her screen showed the projected impact time ticking down. Less than 3 hours. She tried calling her supervisor, Marcus Vey, but his line was busy. She tried the Emergency Confederation liaison channel, but it was routing all calls to the main command center, the same one that had just authorized the strike. Alara felt a wave of nauseating helplessness wash over her. She was just a linguist, a translator of alien words. She had no authority, no power to stop the inevitable. On the main screen, the tactical display showed the Confederation cruiser, the inevitable righteousness, moving into position. Its trajectory was locked, its weapon armed. The precision kinetic impactor, a silent, devastating rod of pure force, was moments away from deployment. Alara watched, her heart pounding in her chest, as the cruiser reached the designated coordinates. The system logged the weapon release. There was no explosion, no flash of light, just a silent, catastrophic collapse. The orphanage, along with the children and caretakers inside, was gone. The timestamp on the screen read 3:47 a.m. local time. Alara slumped back in her chair, the weight of the universe pressing down on her. She had seen the truth, held it in her hands, and been utterly powerless to prevent the horror. The universe, as it turns out, doesn't give a damn about your feelings or your desperate warnings. It just is. And sometimes, what is a nightmare. The aftermath was a silence louder than any explosion. For 12 long hours, Earth remained eerily quiet from the Confederation's perspective. Their monitoring stations picked up no official response, no diplomatic channels opening, no pleas for terms. Ambassador Zixtel, clicking his 3 mouth parts in agitation, declared it a sign of human shock and submission. They are primitives, he reiterated during an emergency session, their communications likely in disarray. Grand Strategist Cavorn, his 6 eyes scanning the silent readouts, felt a prickle of unease that he couldn't articulate. Something felt wrong. This wasn't the bewildered silence of a defeated foe. It was the tense stillness before a storm. Back on Earth, Alara Vance was living in that storm. Her warning had been ignored, her frantic attempts to escalate the information dismissed as a linguistic anomaly by mid-level bureaucrats more concerned with protocol than reality. Now, she was trapped in a nightmare of her own making. The news channels were a relentless loop of devastation. Images of the flattened orphanage, interviews with first responders, and the raw, unedited grief of a nation. The name of the facility, the Sunflower House, became a mournful mantra. Every news report hammered home the same horrifying truth. 234 children, 17 adults. Gone. Alara sat in her analysis hub, the sterile glow of the monitors mocking her. She had known. She had tried. And it hadn't mattered. The guilt was a physical weight, crushing her chest. She saw the faces of the children on the news, smiling, hopeful faces, now just ghosts in the digital ether. She read the articles detailing their lives, their small dreams, and their favorite toys. The detail that haunted her most was a small mention of a specific toy found clutched in the rubble. A worn, stuffed bear. It was a detail that felt impossibly personal in the face of such cosmic indifference. Across the globe, the silence of the first 12 hours began to break, not with diplomatic overtures, but with a surge of human communication, unlike anything the Confederation had ever witnessed. It wasn't centralized, not coming from a single government or military command. It was organic, spreading through civilian networks, private channels, and even encrypted corporate servers. Words like children, orphanage, and justice appeared with alarming frequency, but they were woven into conversations about shipbuilding capacity, logistical support, and rapid retooling of manufacturing facilities. The Confederation's diplomatic AI, designed to analyze and translate human communication, began to struggle. It was spitting out data faster than anyone could process, but the context was baffling. Why were private yacht owners discussing retrofitting their vessels for troop transport? Why were toy manufacturers suddenly shifting production to small, unmanned drones? The AI, designed for the logical, strategic language of warfare and diplomacy, couldn't comprehend the emotional, visceral language of human grief and rage. Grand Strategist Kavorn finally received the translated data from Alera's original warning. The message, buried under layers of bureaucratic red tape, arrived 12 hours too late. His 6 eyes widened in horror as he read her simple, desperate plea. Target misidentified. Civilian structure. Orphanage. Abort strike. He cross-referenced the location, the description, everything. The truth hit him like a physical blow. It wasn't a military facility. It was exactly what the human linguist had said. Children. He called an immediate emergency session. The Supreme Commander's nutrient bath bubbled ominously as Kavorn presented the findings. Ambassador Zixtel clicked his mouth parts in disbelief. Impossible. Our intelligence was clear. Our intelligence, Kavorn stated, his voice low and strained, was compiled by species who consider antenna wiggling an acceptable form of body language analysis. We misinterpreted their social structures. We targeted their most vulnerable. He paused, the weight of the revelation settling on the room. We killed their young. The silence that followed was pregnant with dread. They had conquered worlds and ended civilizations, but they had never targeted the young. It was a line, unspoken and universal, that they had just crossed with catastrophic ignorance. The Dravidian analyst, her voice unnaturally high, offered a desperate hope. Surely they'll understand it was a misinterpretation of cultural norms? We issued standard warnings. We followed protocols. The Supreme Commander's nutrient bath churned. How many casualties? Kavorn's manipulator appendage shook as he transferred the data. 234 juvenile humans, 17 adult caretakers. Children, the commander repeated, the synthesized voice struggling to convey the gravity. We killed their young. The room fell into a stunned silence, the kind that usually only happens in the vacuum of space, except with more imminent dread. The universe might not care about feelings, but the aliens in that room were beginning to feel something akin to fear. A fear born not of military might, but of a profound and terrifying misunderstanding of the species they had just provoked. The Turavian Attaché, a relatively junior diplomat who had actually visited Earth twice, was the first to articulate the depth of the Confederation's blunder. His feathers were flattened against his body in distress as he addressed the stunned room. You don't understand what you've done, he said, his voice tight. Humans don't think like us. They're different. Different how? Demanded Zixtel, his mouth parts trembling slightly. They protect their young above all else, the Turavian explained. Not just their offspring, any young of their species. And they don't compartmentalize conflict the way we do. He looked around at the alien faces, seeing only confusion. For us, war is political. It's strategic. It's about resources and territory and influence. His voice dropped to a near whisper. For humans, when you threaten their young, war becomes personal, and they don't have our restraint. Across the galaxy, Confederation monitoring stations were now reporting an unprecedented surge in human military communications. Ships were being recalled, reserves activated, and production facilities that had been manufacturing consumer goods were rapidly retooling. It wasn't just military assets. Civilian infrastructure was being mobilized on a massive scale. Ferry services were being rerouted to transport personnel. Cargo hauliers were being repurposed for supply lines. Even private space yachts were being hastily refitted. On the main viewing screen in the Confederation Command Center, the first official human response appeared. It wasn't a video feed of a stern-faced leader or a scrolling text of demands. It was a simple, static image, a photograph of the Sunflower House orphanage before the strike, bathed in sunlight, children playing in the yard. Beneath the image, text appeared in stark, white letters. Humanity does not recognize the concept of limited warfare against those who target children. Your action has been categorized as an extinction-level offense. You have 14 standard hours to remove all Confederation assets from human space. After that time, no quarter will be given. No terms will be accepted. May whatever gods you believe in have mercy on you, because we will not. The message was signed simply. humanity. Grand Strategist Kavorn's exoskeleton made an uncomfortable creaking sound as he shifted. Surely, this is diplomatic posturing. No species would declare total war over a tactical error. The Turavian attaché was already backing toward the exit. You still don't understand. For 10,000 years, we fought wars according to rules, conventions, and limits. His voice cracked slightly. Humans invented a concept called total war millennia ago. The complete mobilization of all resources, the targeting of civilian infrastructure, the absence of limitations. He paused at the doorway, and that was just what they did to each other. We just killed their children, their orphan children, the most vulnerable members of their society, the ones they feel the strongest collective obligation to protect. For the first time in living memory, genuine fear rippled through the Confederation command chamber. They can't possibly stand against us, Zixtal clicked, but his mouth parts were trembling. We have 10,000 worlds. They have one. That's what the ancient Hagloyans thought, too, said the Turavian softly. No one's heard from them in 3,000 years, and they only threatened a human mining colony. As if to punctuate his point, the chamber's emergency lighting suddenly flashed red. The planetary defense grid surrounding the Confederation capital had just detected unauthorized ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel. Thousands of them, all of human design. The universe, as mentioned earlier, doesn't give a damn about your feelings. But humans give so many damns about their children that they just might burn the universe down to make a point. And the lesson was about to begin. If there were an intergalactic award for the most spectacular misreading of an enemy, the Galactic Confederation would have just won it by such a margin that they need to invent new mathematics to calculate their score. Unfortunately for them, there would be no shiny trophy, just the rapidly approaching fleet of very, very angry humans. At the heart of the Confederation's blunder lay a fundamental misunderstanding of human psychology that their most advanced AI systems had somehow missed. Their countless xenopsychologists, with their impressive arrays of degrees and tentacles, had collectively failed to grasp a concept so basic that human toddlers understood it. Don't hurt kids, ever. I still don't understand the disproportionate response, complained High Admiral Corvex as emergency klaxons wailed throughout the Confederation's Central Command Center. The Admiral's crystalline form refracted the emergency lighting in what would have been quite beautiful under different circumstances. Say, circumstances not involving imminent annihilation. We've issued a formal apology. We've offered reparations. We've even volunteered to build them a new orphanage. Grand Strategist Kavorn, whose many eyes hadn't blinked in approximately 2 hours, stared at the tactical display showing the rapidly advancing human fleet. Admiral, imagine someone burned down your crystalline growth chamber and killed all your facets in formation. That's completely different, huffed Corvex, several of his edges dulling in indignation. My facets are my direct genetic descendants. These were random human offspring with no biological connection to most of the humans now threatening us. The Turavian attaché, who had been frantically gathering his personal effects into a secure container, paused long enough to give what humans would recognize as an eye roll. And that, Admiral, is exactly why you're about to have a very bad day. Humans don't make that distinction. To them, all their young are equally precious. Perhaps the unrelated ones even more so. On the main viewing screen, the human fleet continued its implacable advance. What the Confederation found most disturbing wasn't the number of ships, though that was concerning enough, but rather the complete absence of communication beyond that single chilling ultimatum. No demands for negotiation, no requests for clarification, not even the expected threats and posturing that typically preceded interspecies conflict. Just silence and movement. Perhaps, ventured a Dravidian strategist whose name no one could remember. They're simply trying to intimidate us, a show of force before real negotiations begin. The Supreme Commander's nutrient bath had taken on a distinctly yellowish tinge. a sign of extreme stress among its species. Replay the historical file on human conflict patterns, it gurgled. The AI complied, and the chamber filled with holographic representations of human warfare throughout their history. The images flickered rapidly. Ancient warriors with primitive blades, massive formations clashing across muddy fields, mechanized units rumbling over devastated landscapes, mushroom clouds blooming over cities. "Stop," ordered the commander. "Analyze the pattern we're seeing." The AI's pleasant voice contrasted jarringly with the images still frozen around them. Human warfare has evolved through distinct phases, from limited tribal conflicts to total mobilization of entire societies. The pattern indicates an increasing capacity for destruction paired with increasingly sophisticated ethical constraints. "Constraints?" exclaimed Ambassador Zixtel, his mouth parts clicking rapidly. "That's what we need to appeal to. They're moral codes." Continuing analysis, the AI proceeded, ignoring the interruption. However, historical data indicates these constraints are situational rather than absolute. When humans perceive an existential threat or a violation of their deepest taboos, all constraints are abandoned. The chamber fell silent again. "Define deepest taboos," the commander requested. "Primary among them," the AI stated, "harm to their young, particularly deliberate harm to children who lack protection." Someone made a sound that the translation matrix couldn't quite interpret, but which carried unmistakable dread across species boundaries. "There must be precedent," insisted Zixtel, "some historical example of reconciliation after such an event that we can learn from." The AI paused for precisely 1.3 seconds, an eternity for a system capable of processing yottabytes of information in microseconds. Finding historical parallels. No exact match was found. Closest analog. During global human conflicts, factions that deliberately targeted civilian children were typically not offered terms. They were systematically destroyed and their ideologies eradicated. As if to punctuate this analysis, the tactical display chimed. The human fleet had just accelerated beyond projected capabilities. Their arrival time had just shortened by half. "But this wasn't deliberate," protested a junior tactician, their appendages waving frantically. "It was an intelligence failure, a misunderstanding of human social structures." The Turavian Adiche, now by the door with his belongings, laughed bitterly. "Oh, they know that. They probably knew at the moment they identified the target of our strike. That's the worst part. They know it was a mistake." "Then why?" "Because they don't care," the Turavian said simply. "In human ethical frameworks, some mistakes are unforgivable. Some lines, once crossed, cannot be uncrossed. They're not interested in our reasons or excuses. From their perspective, we've demonstrated that we're capable of killing their children. That makes us an existential threat, regardless of our intentions." At that moment, the defensive grid reported the first human ships breaking through the outer perimeter. They weren't the largest vessels in the human fleet. Those were still hours away. These were smaller, faster craft, each carrying only a handful of humans. "Special forces," murmured Kavorn with something almost like admiration. "They're sending their elite warriors ahead of the main force." The monitoring systems tracking these advanced ships suddenly fizzled with interference. "What are they doing?" demanded the Supreme Commander. "Unknown," replied the AI. "Their communication patterns don't match any known human military protocols. They appear to be singing." The system managed to filter through enough of the interference to play a fragment of audio. A chorus of human voices, perfectly synchronized, filled the chamber with a melody that somehow managed to be both beautiful and terrifying. In the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air. "What is that?" whispered someone. The Turavian, already halfway through the door, looked back one final time. "That's their war song, the Star-Spangled Banner. It dates back centuries." He paused. "You know what's interesting about humans? Most species develop war chants to intimidate their enemies. Humans sing about their flag surviving bombardment. As if to underscore his point, the defensive grid registered multiple penetrations. Human operatives had already breached the Confederation's supposedly impenetrable headquarters. How is this possible? Gasped Zixtal. Our security systems are the most advanced in the galaxy. On a secondary screen, security footage showed a human in black combat gear systematically disabling a group of Confederation guards. The human's movements were fluid, efficient, and utterly merciless. But what struck the watching officials wasn't the skill. It was the expression visible through the human's transparent face shield. The human wasn't angry, wasn't snarling or showing signs of battle rage. The human was smiling. The human in the transparent face shield wasn't just smiling. The expression was one of grim satisfaction, the kind that chills deeper than outright fury. It was the smile of someone who had waited a long time for this moment and intended to savor every second. The security footage flickered as more human operatives breached different sections of the headquarters. They moved with a coordinated precision that belied their supposed technological inferiority. They bypassed systems the Confederation considered foolproof, navigated corridors with uncanny speed, and neutralized guards with brutal efficiency. "We need to evacuate," declared the Supreme Commander, its nutrient bath now churning violently. "All non-essential personnel to emergency shelters. Command staff to the secure facility on." The lights went out. When the emergency systems kicked in 3 seconds later, the chamber had changed. Standing in the center of the room, having apparently materialized from nowhere, was a human. Not in combat gear like the others they'd glimpsed, but wearing what appeared to be a standard diplomatic uniform. Silver hair, a lined face, and eyes that looked older than some Confederation civilizations. It was the human diplomat who had been present at the New Cycle Summit, the one who had laughed at the Grand Arbiter's ceremonial headgear. "Good afternoon," said the human with a smile that contained all the warmth of interstellar vacuum. "I'm a human diplomatic representative. I believe we've met before, though you may not remember me. I was at the New Cycle Summit, 3rd row, left side. I laughed at the Grand Arbiter's hat. No one spoke. No one moved. I've been authorized to offer you a one-time opportunity," the human continued pleasantly, as though discussing the weather rather than the fate of 10,000 worlds. "A chance to limit the scope of what's coming." Hope flickered across various alien features. "Surrender the individuals responsible for ordering the strike on our orphanage. All of them, from the intelligence analysts who identified the target to the commanders who authorized the attack. Everyone." Ambassador Zixtal's mouth parts clicked hesitantly. "And if we do this, what terms will humanity offer the Confederation?" The human smile widened fractionally. "Oh, you misunderstand. There are no terms for the Confederation. That entity ceases to exist as of today. This offer is merely to spare worlds not directly involved in the decision. A chance for the innocent to step away from what's about to happen to the guilty." The Supreme Commander's nutrient bath rippled as it found its voice. "You cannot possibly intend to dismantle a political structure that has maintained peace across this galaxy for 10,000 years over a single regrettable incident." "Watch us," replied the human, still smiling that terrible smile. "You see, that's the thing about humans that your reports and analyses never quite captured. We're not just aggressive or resilient or adaptable. We're vindictive. When you hurt what we love, we don't just defeat you. We erase you. We salt the earth. We make examples that last millennia." The human checked a small device on their wrist. "You have 30 minutes to compile the list of those responsible. After that, we stop asking nicely." As suddenly as they had appeared, the human was gone, leaving behind only a small communication device on the central table. In the stunned silence that followed, the Turivian attaché finally slipped out the door. No one tried to stop him. They were too busy watching the main tactical display where the full human fleet was now visible. Thousands upon thousands of ships of all sizes, from tiny fighters to massive dreadnoughts, dwarfed anything in the Confederation Navy. And painted on the side of every single one, the image of a human child's toy, a small stuffed bear. "I don't understand the symbolism," whispered Zixtel. The AI's voice, when it answered, seemed subdued. "It appears to be a teddy bear. A comfort object is given to human children, particularly those who have lost their parents." The Supreme Commander stared at the endless fleet advancing toward them, each ship bearing that innocent symbol transformed into something terrifying. 30 minutes, it burbled quietly. "Begin compiling the list." As various officials rushed to comply, Grand Strategist Kavorn remained staring at the tactical display. "We thought we understood them," he murmured to no one in particular. "We cataloged their behaviors, their technologies, their cultural artifacts. We thought we knew their strengths and weaknesses." He shook his head slowly. "But we never understood what they become when you take something they love." The countdown on the communication device continued its remorseless advance toward zero. Each tick brought the Confederation closer to learning exactly what total war meant to a species that had spent most of its history practicing it on itself and was now, for the first time, united in turning that terrible skill outward. The universe, as previously noted, doesn't give a damn about your feelings. But it was becoming increasingly clear that humans gave far too many damns about certain things. And the consequences of ignoring that fact were about to reshape galactic history. History books, should there be anyone left to write them after all this, would probably describe humanity's response as disproportionate. Humans themselves would use a different term, appropriate. Funny how perspective works when you're the species that just had its orphanage turned into a smoking crater. The 30-minute deadline came and went. The Confederation, in its infinite bureaucratic wisdom, had managed to produce a list of exactly 12 individuals they deemed responsible for the orphanage targeting error. The human diplomatic representative, who had reappeared precisely as the countdown reached zero, took one look at the list and laughed. Not the pleasant laugh of someone enjoying a good joke, but the hollow laugh of someone who'd expected disappointment and received it right on schedule. 12? The human asked, running a finger down the datapad. "Fascinating. You've managed to find exactly 12 individuals responsible in an organization spanning 10,000 worlds." They handed the pad back. "Try again. We'll wait." Except, of course, they didn't wait. As the Confederation leadership stammered excuses about chains of command and distributed responsibility, the first wave of human ships reached the defense perimeter around the Confederation capital. What happened next would later be described by surviving witnesses as artistic demolition. The Confederation's orbital defense grid, the pride of their military engineering, constructed over centuries, designed to withstand attacks from entire fleets, lasted approximately 7 minutes against human assault. Not because humans had overwhelmingly superior technology, but because they attacked in ways the system designers had never anticipated. They didn't target the grid's power sources or control centers. They didn't attempt to overwhelm its computational systems. Instead, they simply used their defensive protocols against it. 500 small, unmanned craft, little more than engines and transponders, approached the grid from different vectors, each broadcasting distress signals identical to those used by Confederation civilian ships. Defense protocol required the grid to divert resources to validate these signals before firing. While the system was busy doing exactly that, precision strikes from human stealth vessels, which apparently weren't a theoretical impossibility after all, targeted the sensors doing the validation. One by one, blind spots appeared in the grid. Through those gaps poured human special forces and ships, so small they barely registered as more than debris. Not to destroy the grid, that was already happening quite efficiently, but to secure something far more valuable: the vast data archives containing the complete records of the Confederation's 10,000-year history. "You're stealing our cultural heritage," protested Ambassador Zixtel as the human representative showed them real-time footage of the archive infiltration. "Our art, our literature, our scientific achievements. These belong to all sentient species. Yes, agreed the human pleasantly. They do, which is why we're preserving them before we dismantle your political structure. Unlike some, we don't target cultural artifacts. The barb landed like a physical blow. Meanwhile, across Confederation space, human diplomatic vessels appeared simultaneously in the orbits of 317 worlds. Every planet that had voting representatives on the Confederation Council broadcast the same message. Your government authorized an attack that killed our children. Your government now faces extinction for this crime. You have a choice. Stand with them and share their fate, or declare independence and neutrality in the coming conflict. It was arguably the most elegant application of psychological warfare in recorded history. Not a single human weapon was fired at any of these worlds. Not a single threat was made against their populations. Just a simple choice presented without emotion, leaving each world to consider the images now flooding every communication channel. Images of a destroyed orphanage, of small, broken bodies pulled from the rubble, of a unified human fleet larger than anyone had believed possible. One by one, worlds began to break away from the Confederation. First dozens, then hundreds. This is illegal secession, raged the Grand Arbiter from his emergency bunker. They cannot simply, they're not doing anything, interrupted the human representative. We merely provided information. Your member worlds are making their own decisions. In the command center, the Supreme Commander watched in horror as the tactical display showed the Confederation literally dissolving around them. Ow, it burbled. How did you organize this so quickly? How did you build a fleet this size without our knowledge? The human smiled that same terrible smile. We didn't have to build anything new. Every ship you see out there already existed. They were just distributed, serving different nations, different corporations, and different purposes. When we received news of the orphanage, something unprecedented happened. We agreed. The human gestured to the display. That fleet isn't the result of some lengthy military buildup. It's what happens when humans stop fighting each other and turn their attention outward. Every nation, every corporation, every private military contractor and independent operator, all with one purpose. But your species is famously fractious, protested Kavorn. Your entire history is defined by internal conflict. Yes, said the human. And now you know why the rest of the galaxy should be profoundly grateful for that fact. When we fight ourselves, everyone else gets to live in peace. As if to punctuate this statement, the main Confederation Defense Fleet, finally mobilized and moving to engage the human armada, encountered something new. Not weapons, not ships, but a wave of data transmitted directly into their command systems. The data consisted of personal messages, hundreds of thousands of them, each from an individual human to the Confederation forces. They weren't threats or demands. They were explanations, stories. Each message contained the name, image, and biography of a child who had died in the orphanage attack, their hopes, their dreams, their favorite foods and games and subjects in school. The small details that made each one a person, not a statistic. And at the end of each message, the same question: are you prepared to die for those who killed this child? The Confederation fleet, facing both overwhelming human military power and this unprecedented psychological assault, did the unthinkable. Ship by ship, they stood down. Commanders refused orders to engage. Crews mutinied rather than fire on the human vessels. As the last elements of organized resistance crumbled, the human representative surveyed the Confederation leadership bunker with the air of someone examining a particularly unsuccessful science experiment. We would like that complete list now. Not 12 sacrificial offerings, but everyone involved from planning to execution. The human checked their timepiece. You have 1 hour. After that, we start conducting our investigation, and we're considerably less surgical in our methods. The Grand Arbiter found his voice at last. And then, after you've had your revenge, What becomes of galactic civilization? The human considered this. Something better, we hope. Something that understands certain lines cannot be crossed, even by accident. A pause. We are not monsters, despite what you currently think. We don't want to rule your worlds or destroy your people. We just want justice for our children and a guarantee it never happens again. The list was compiled within the hour. It contained 4,823 names. Not one of them would escape. The thing about consequences is that they have this annoying habit of arriving whether you prepared for them or not. Kind of like in-laws or tax audits, except with more existential dread and fewer awkward dinner conversations. Precisely one standard galactic week after the orphanage was reduced to rubble, the Galactic Confederation, that proud 10,000-year-old institution, ceased to exist. Not metaphorically, not in some abstract political sense. It literally ceased to exist. The human fleet, having secured control of all major Confederation facilities, systematically dismantled the entire governmental apparatus. Archives were copied and then transferred to a newly established Galactic Heritage Foundation, run by a coalition of former member worlds. Administrative systems were archived and then erased. Command centers were evacuated and then converted to memorial museums. The 4,823 individuals deemed responsible faced human justice. Not execution, as many had feared, but something many found worse. They were sentenced to rebuild. Each one was assigned to the reconstruction efforts on Earth, rebuilding not just the orphanage, but the surrounding community, working alongside the humans who had lost children in the attack. Poetic justice, remarked the human representative, watching former Confederation officials laying foundations under the watchful eyes of grief-stricken humans. They'll spend the rest of their lives creating something to replace what they destroyed. The Supreme Commander, now simply a private citizen of its species, couldn't comprehend the sentence. This isn't vengeance, it burbled in confusion. Where is the retribution? Oh, that's already happened, replied the human. We destroyed everything you built. Your legacy, your achievement, your place in history, it's gone. The Confederation will be remembered only as the government that bombed an orphanage and paid the price. That's the vengeance. This, they gestured to the reconstruction. This is justice. Across what had once been Confederation space, a new political reality emerged. Not a human empire, as many had feared, but a looser association of independent worlds. Humans offered technology, protection, and trade. Still, they demanded one non-negotiable commitment in return: the adoption of what became known as the Montana Accord, a set of principles that established absolute prohibitions against targeting the young of any species under any circumstances. The Accord included a mutual defense provision that made any violation a crime J, justifying total war by all signatories. You fundamentally altered the balance of power in this galaxy, observed Cavorn, now serving as a representative of his home world to the new association. No, corrected the human diplomat. We've introduced a concept your kind never fully embraced: consequences. Some lines can't be crossed without fundamental, irreversible repercussions. 10 standard years later, on the site where the orphanage once stood, a new structure was completed, larger, better equipped, and surrounded by gardens maintained by former Confederation officials. Above its entrance, a plaque in multiple languages, including the extinct bureaucratic script of the Confederation. Here, we remember the children who died and the civilization that died with them. May both serve as reminders that the universe has lines that must never be crossed. Beneath it, in smaller text, humanity remembers its promises both to protect and to avenge. The galaxy learned its lesson. No one bombed another orphanage. They wouldn't dare. The hidden detail, the worn, stuffed bear clutched in the rubble, became a quiet symbol of the price of miscalculation. It wasn't just a toy. It was the last comfort of a child, transformed by human grief into the first banner of a new, terrifying kind of war. And the universe, while it may not care about your feelings, was finally beginning to understand the terrifying power of human rage when those feelings were violated. And that was the end of the story. Comment below if you want the next chapter, and hit that like button. Please subscribe, turn on the bell, and as always, keep the last light burning.